It's time to check out the Air Max Zero. These shoes were made to commemorate the second anniversary of Air Max Day on March 26th, 2015. Fortunately, I was able to score this pair online a few days early, so the shoes showed up at my doorstep on March 25th, the day before Air Max Day. I was blown away by how giant the box was. Not just the box that you see in front of you, but the big giant cardboard box that Nike used to ship the shoes to me. It was like big enough to fit 3 regular shoes in there. And when this box showed up at my door, I was like, man, I wonder if there's some Air Max Day swag or like a t-shirt, or maybe they used bubble wrap. Like, what's the reason for this big giant box? Seriously, it's the biggest box that Nike's ever used to ship me just one pair of shoes in. I opened up the box and I was very disappointed that this box was just haphazardly thrown in there, sort of bouncing around on its way from Memphis to me in California. And I'm actually lucky that the box isn't more beat up than it is. When you look back here at the back of the box, you'll notice that it's got this crack right here, a dent right here. Honestly, the poor way that they packed these shoes in the big giant oversized box, I'm lucky that this box isn't more messed up than it is. And check out the box. It's very nostalgic. It's orange on top with the gray stripes on the bottom. Very reminiscent of what the old school boxes used to look like that the original Air Max came out in back in the day. But to sort of put the size of this box in perspective, I want to break out the pair of Air Max 1s that came out on Air Max Day in 2014. And you can see just how big and giant the Air Max Zero box is compared to the Air Max 1 box. And even more interestingly, when you look at the sizes of these shoes, the Air Max 1s are an 11.5 and the Air Max Zeros are an 11. So you've got a smaller shoe in a giant box. And this box and the shipping box really upset me because Nike created the Considered program years ago. They have a Better World program, and they claim to be environmentally conscious. Like when they manufacture products and when they pick out cardboard boxes and shipping boxes, they claim to care about the world and the environment and not to be wasteful. Like that was one of the big things that they were saying about the Flyknit technology, is that there's not a lot of wasted material. And then here they're taking this giant box, shipping it in an even bigger box, and it's just so wasteful and unnecessary. And yeah, the box that you're looking at is very nostalgic, but I would argue that the same nostalgia could have been achieved with a much smaller box. And incidentally, back in the day, the original Nike boxes were very lean and slender. Now, this isn't a real Nike box. It's actually a display piece that I got at Nike Town Beverly Hills years ago. But just to compare, I mean, the size of this Air Max Zero box is just ridiculous and totally unnecessary. And if you're gonna take the trouble to design a box and try to be nostalgic with it, at least ship it carefully enough that the box shows up to your door in good shape. I'm lucky that this box wasn't more beat up than it is. So it says Air Max Zero on here. Zero is Tinker Hatfield's handwriting. We know that Tinker was the designer of the original Air Max, which we might as well break out really quickly before we get into the Air Max Zero. Here is the pair from the history of Air Pack. Beautiful shoe. The Air Max 1 was the first Nike ever to feature visible air. It was inspired by the George Pompidou Center. Tinker Hatfield wanted this shoe to be bright red because he wanted to draw people's attention to it so that they would look right at the shoe and then look at the air bubble on here, and they would, for the first time ever, be able to understand Nike Air technology. So the Air Max Zero is actually supposed to be the predecessor to the Air Max 1, but with some modern updates. And I would argue that what Nike should have done is just release the Air Max Zero in original form. And as we get in here and look at these shoes, I want to point out some of the things that, in my opinion, are just not right. This shoe, the Air Max Zero, was the predecessor to the Air Max 1, and the Air Max 1 came out in 1987. So in theory, the Air Max Zero should have been from before 1987, but when we look at the shoe, you'll see that it's a mishmash of all sorts of different technologies that came out way after 1987. Nike said that the Air Max Zero was an updated version of the original shoe, but I would argue that they should have just kept it OG. Let's get in here and check it out. So the paper says the one before the one. with Tinker Hatfield's signature on there, or at least a copy of his signature, which is cool. Not everybody's lucky enough to have Tinker Hatfield's autograph. And if you have a pair of these Air Max Zeros, there's some details on here with Tinker's autograph. So sort of a copy of his autograph for everyone. There's the Air Max Zero. Let's break out the brick and check out the other pair up close and personal. Here you go. So when I first saw this shoe, I was like, why did they make it in blue? The original Air Max was in red, and it was really important to Tinker that it was in red so that it would draw your attention to the shoe. Blue seemed all wrong to me. Then I started thinking about the original sketch of the Air Max Zero, and that shoe was yellow. Actually, you can go on YouTube or Google and search for Tinker Hatfield Air Max interview. There's about an 8-minute video that shows Tinker's inspiration for the Air Max 1. It talks about the George Pompidou Center. It talks about what he was trying to achieve, being provocative with this shoe. He wanted to make it bright red. In that video, you'll see he pulls out an initial sketch of what he envisioned as the first shoe with visible air, and that shoe was mustard yellow. So again, this navy blue rendition didn't really make a whole lot of sense to me. I was like, you'd think that they would make the Air Max Zero in red or in the original yellow. And when I saw blue, I couldn't help but think they're going to come out with a red one, and they're just coming out with a blue one to try to sell us a shoe for $150, and then next week a red one will come out. We haven't seen pictures of the red one surface, but a yellow one did surface. Tinker Hatfield was holding it in his hand. Hopefully they'll release that pair of shoes. I'm sure they will. You know, once Nike starts cranking out a silhouette, they love to just make it in a variety of colors and materials just to capitalize on getting the factories ready to make that shoe. Since they made the shoe in blue, it wouldn't take much for them to make it in yellow and in red, and I would expect to see those models hitting retail pretty soon. Let's look at this shoe. I want to start here with a little hang tag. Cool little Tinker Hatfield detail. That's his signature right here. And then on the other side, Air Max Zero. You'll notice that this hang tag is clear plastic. It's supposed to represent the visible air window, which is what made the Air Max famous. I want to look at the Air Max Zero starting from the outsole, and we'll work our way up. So that's the bottom of the shoe, and it's been adapted from the Air Max 1 Ultra Moire. Check this out. Over here is a hybrid pair of shoes, the Air Max 1 and the Moire. Remember, the Moire came out in 2006 and was one of the first shoes ever to be compatible with Nike Plus technology, which at the time there was a chip that you would put in your shoe and another chip that you'd put on your iPod Nano, and when you worked out, the shoe would talk to the Nano and it would tell you the progress of your workout. So this is a hybrid of the Air Max 1 and the Moire. And when we look at the sole right here, you'll see that it is exactly the same. Let's break up this shoe so we can see it's exactly the same as the sole for the Air Max Zero. And that doesn't make sense to me. It's like, why take this updated outsole from a different shoe, and a hybrid at that, and then put it on this Air Max Zero, claiming that this was something to do with the shoe that was the predecessor to the Air Max 1. Interestingly, visible air that you see underneath the shoe right here didn't happen until 1991 with the Air 180. Look at this shoe in ultramarine colors. It's called the 180 because visible air is 180 degrees around. So there's the visible air underneath the shoe. Now, of course, that's different than what it looks like on the Air Max Zero, but still, the innovation for visible air underneath the shoe did not happen until 1991, and I just think that it's wrong for them to release a shoe that's supposed to be a predecessor when it's got bits and pieces of things that didn't happen until years later. So let's keep working our way up. So check out right here the midsole, and you can see that visible air window on here. Notice that it's blue in color. Originally, visible air was not colored. It actually wasn't until 1993 with the Air Max 93, which back in the day was known as the Air Max 270, because visible air could be seen 270 degrees around the heel. But you'll notice that the visible air in this shoe matches the swoosh. It's blue, and this was the first time that visible air was colored. And then here we go. Here it is on the predecessor. And like I said, it doesn't make sense. Like, that technology, if you can even call colored air a technology, didn't come out until at least 5 years after the Air Max 1. So why feature that on the shoe that was supposed to come out before the Air Max 1? Let's keep looking at the shoe. Look at the upper right here. You'll notice that it's very seamless, almost like a hyperfuse technology or a tape pack. This sort of an upper is very futuristic, something from modern times, like the last few years, and really it had no place on anything in the 1980s. Like, you can see that there's very minimal stitching and seams on here, and that is like a very modern innovation. Let's go back and look at the history of Air Max 1, and you'll see that there's just lots of stitching between all of the different panels. It just is much more true to what the shoes looked like in the late 80s than this one right here. Other things about the Air Max Zero. So there's also some metallic hits on this shoe. You'll notice that the laces have the metallic on here. The Air Max Zero logo on the tongue flashes metallic at night. Same thing with the swoosh. Same thing with the Nike on the back. This 3M metallic feature didn't happen on the Air Max until 1995 with the Air Max 95. And then in 97, the whole upper was 3M metallic. But you can see the hits of 3M on this shoe, on the tongue right here, also on the back, and they took this and put it on the Air Max Zero. So again, we're taking things that didn't hit the Air Max line until 1995 and putting them on a shoe that supposedly was sketched out and drawn up closer to 1985. And to me, it just doesn't make sense. Another thing as we're looking at this shoe is this neoprene-like tongue. It's very similar to the Air Huarache that came out in 1991, and here we have yet another feature of this Air Max Zero that really wasn't right for the time. I just feel like there were way too many modern upgrades, and when you look at this shoe, it looks much more like a Janoski Air Max or an Air Max Thea or an Air Max Tava. There's a whole bunch of different Air Maxes that look just like this shoe. So to try to claim that this was the predecessor for the first Air Max, it just doesn't make sense to me. I think what Nike should have done is kept it plain and simple, grabbed a picture of that initial sketch that Tinker drew in yellow and released that shoe, exactly the way that shoe was drawn. And it would have been much more right to call that the prototype to the Air Max 1 than this, which really, in my opinion, is very gimmicky and was just a way that Nike could capitalize on Air Max Day, which, by the way, of course, is a fictitious holiday that Nike created to try to get people to buy Air Max shoes. And here on the second anniversary of Air Max Day, they came out with this, which I just think is expensive, gimmicky, wasteful, and not accurate, not an accurate depiction of what Tinker's original drawing was, which ultimately became the Air Max 1, which ultimately changed the sneaker game forever. Let me know your thoughts on the Air Max Zero. Do you like it? Did you buy it? Would you buy a yellow one? Would you buy a red one? Do you wish it was more like Tinker's sketch? Please let me know in the comments. It's been a pleasure walking you through the Air Max Zero.